how important is HCG. Now look, I want to start off by saying, I know there's people that can tolerate just using injectable testosterone and no HCG, and they're fine. And probably it's because the luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, as well as the health of the testicles doesn't degrade completely. It's just enough to keep them going. So not talking to you guys. But for everybody else, like the luteinizing hormone and FSH shutdown that is induced by TRT is, in terms of sexual function and specifically penile health, kind of catastrophic. If you inject testosterone, that testosterone is going to have a major benefit on muscle tissue, dopamine synthesis, energy, metabolism, strength, and overall well-being. But it doesn't necessarily enhance sexual function. We're going to get into HCG and the local penile tissue hydration that it induces, the vascular function that it induces, the nitric oxide synthase expression, the neuroendocrine inputs to libido and orgasm sensitivity, and the intratesticular estrogen and progesterone production. That really does matter for a whole complex system that needs to be functional for the sex stuff to be right on TRT. Let's get into it. All right, before we start the video, look, Cortex Labs is a TRT guidance, sexual dysfunction resolution, and performance oscillation company. Got a range of different products ranging from mastering testosterone cypionate. If you need to dial in on the most popular ester, especially around sexual function, get this video course. I designed it specifically for that, to take testosterone cypionate, every imaginable protocol to dial in the sexual function. It's an instant download. You can get it under a minute, livecortex.com. If you need to hire me, I am a coach, one of the most sought out coaches on TRT protocol restructuring, specifically for sexual function. Okay, we have a one-off call. It's just a consult with me. Otherwise, if you have long-standing sexual dysfunction, we're going to need time. We've got one-on-one ongoing packages. You can book me for any of that stuff in under a minute at livecortex.com. All right, this wouldn't be a fitting Cortex Labs video unless we went to Reddit and saw what people were saying about HCG. So let's start with this one. Is it normal for HCG to make your libido skyrocket? So here's a case in point, right? Someone's on testosterone. They start taking HCG. It dramatically affects the sexual system. Here's another one. Your personal experiences with HCG and its effects on libido. Guy in the comments goes, increases sensitivity big time. Another guy, absolute game changer. Sex drive increased massively and I felt natural. I will be on this as long as it's available. Another guy, worked for me, dude. Not a huge boost to test levels, more subtle, but for libido and sexual side of things, it worked well. So, I mean, you're going to see this common theme where people that are just on TRT add HCG and then suddenly the sexual system feels normal. For me personally, I can say that that's basically my experience. On just TRT alone, if I remove the HCG, I'll be fine for like 2 weeks, right? But once the testicles completely atrophy and the intratesticular balance of TAS, DHT, estradiol, progesterone starts going out of whack, then I lose a little bit of sensation. I get some sort of a dry organ situation because it's just not hydrated and not properly vascularized. My actual mental libido dips pretty significantly, right? It really does dip without HCG. And if I could look at that state in terms of sexual function and be like, is this optimal? The answer would be no. So let's actually talk about the crux of the issue here. Even with sufficient systemic testosterone induced by TRT injections, without HCG, you actually induce selective hormone deprivation at the testicular and the downstream neurosteroid level. All of this impacts local penile hydration and vascular function. Nitric oxide synthase expression. Again, this is the enzyme that produces nitric oxide. Well, you have less of that with atrophied testicles. This impacts, again, the neuroendocrine inputs to libido, which revolve mainly around the hypothalamus and the limbic system, and of course the intratesticular estrogen and progesterone production. And what this usually results in is like totally high testosterone, depending on what you're injecting on the blood work, and estradiol probably being in a reasonable place, but suboptimal sexual function, often described in some cases as a dehydrated penis, which is terrible, poor base rigidity, like base of the sex organ rigidity, reduced arousal intensity, and somewhat of a muted climax. Luteinizing hormone shutdown, which is what you induce when you're on TRT, unless you're one of those very, very small subset of guys that just like somehow keep the testicular system not fully atrophied and they don't need HCG, equals a collapse of the intratesticular hormone axis. You suppress LH and then you get a suppression of Leydig cell testosterone and estradiol production. You suppress follicle stimulating hormone, which you do on TRT. Well, then you get a suppression of Sertoli cell support of spermatogenesis. And this is something that no one ever talks about, but that I found in the research on this, is that when you suppress luteinizing hormone and FSH with TRT and you don't take HCG, you reduce paracrine communication within the testes. And paracrine basically refers to a hormone which only has its effect in the vicinity of the gland or the actual organ itself. And exogenous testosterone, like doing testosterone injections, does replace systemic testosterone, but not local intratesticular hormone pools, which, by the way, are 10 to 100 times higher in concentration than the circulating T and are required for optimal both reproductive health as well as sexual health. Let's talk about estrogen. Yes, I love to hate on estrogen because above a certain range, it will just mute everything. However, no one's ever said, and you guys know that I've always said, you can't crash it. I mean, if you crash it, then you're going to have problems too. And sometimes problems relating to sexual function are a lot worse when you crash estrogen. Estrogen is locally synthesized in the testes via aromatase, and it plays a non-redundant role, like a very necessary role, meaning the estrogen in your bloodstream is not backing you up at the testicular level. In penile tissue health and brain level arousal. Estrogen receptors, okay, ERB, ERA, they are expressed in penile endothelial tissue, the smooth muscle of the penis, otherwise known as the corpus cavernosum, and in the brain, the medial preoptic area of the hypothalamus, also very implicit in libido. And a rapid reduction or withdrawal, as you would see with just TRT without HCG for some people, most people, causes a decrease in intra-organ nitric oxide synthase expression, which means you're going to be producing less nitric oxide. It induces reduced penile rigidity. This is something that people see if they're on HCG and they go off of it and they give it a month. Or if people over time just being on test injections and never add HCG, this starts to happen. And then again, you get a flat emotional and sexual tone. It's not just about the sex stuff. Sometimes with HCG, your emotions come back and you sort of feel a lot more stable and baseline. Whereas without it, you're kind of flat. Systemic testosterone raises systemic estradiol, but not in tissue-specific areas where it matters, and especially the sexual system. So you do need that estrogen for the testes to function normally, and thus sexual function to be good. HCG reinstates local testicular function that TRT alone cannot, to stimulate endogenous testosterone production in the testes, which, by the way, the effect of which is tremendously different than the effect of just systemic testosterone via an injection. You restore testicular production and thus homeostasis of estradiol, pregnenolone, progesterone, and DHEA. And you obviously restore or reverse testicular atrophy and thus restore organ-specific paracrine signaling. Again, paracrine having to do with the hormone only operating within the secreting gland or the organ system from which it originates. The reactivation of the testes, in this case induced by HCG, supports local neurosteroidogenesis, especially pregnenolone, which will convert to allopregnanolone. And it rebalances a really, really critical tone, a really critical sort of seesaw situation between dopamine and GABA, the tone of those neurotransmitters specifically, which is needed for relaxation and libido. Now let's talk about the clinical relevance of having all this stuff restored. What do people actually report? Well, number one, obviously, the lowest hanging fruit, return of testicular fullness, which does matter. Number two, improvement in ejaculatory force, right? There is a reflex that is involved in the ejaculation process, which is sort of forceful if it's healthy and non-forceful when it's not. A restoration, and this is very important for erections, of base penile rigidity. That matters a lot. And of course, as people often report, enhancements in orgasm intensity. Now, why wouldn't serum T, just injecting testosterone itself, which does convert to estradiol and DHT, fix the sexual system alone? Now look, systemic testosterone reaches peripheral tissues, the muscle, the skin, and the liver, but not the seminiferous tubules or the epididymis. These are structures within the intratesticular, male sexual system that without HCG, or I suppose you could use Clomid, but I don't think Clomid is a good idea to block estrogen receptors. I just don't think that compound is smart to use. Well, then you get tissue-specific hormone starvation. Without the HCG, that's what you get. Now let's talk about pulsatility. What you have when LH-FSH is suppressed and you're not taking HCG is a lack of pulsativity of intratesticular testosterone. Your normal LH-FSH, it pulses. It happens in these sort of waves, this frequency that is kind of continuous and happens throughout the day. Endogenous testosterone production, meaning test produced in your testes, which you can only do via HCG in this context, supports the neurological rhythm of sexual function, the rhythm, okay? And mimicking that on TRT requires either HCG injections with testosterone, or I assume, or I suppose you could probably get away with that with like pulsatile microdoses of testosterone and DHT, which no one wants to do. Now, it seems as if DHT might reach the intrapenile or intrasex organ area when you're using injections, but definitely not to the extent that it would if you're producing your own endogenous testosterone. It gets converted by 5-alpha reductase 2 in the testicles. If somehow there's, because of this, like low DHT reaching the testicles, well, then you have less androgen receptor activation in the sexual organs. That means you get weak nocturnal erections, you get a delayed response to arousal, and some people report a loss of that swollen, kind of hydrated feel of the penis. HCG improves local testicular 5-alpha reductase activity, meaning you're going to make more DHT and convert more of your test to that really, really critical hormone for paracrine signaling in the testes called DHT. You have mechanisms by which you induce PDE5 inhibition on your own so that you can facilitate erections, and loss of testicular and penile estrogen, which would happen if you're atrophied completely and you're just taking testosterone and not taking HCG, equals an impaired PDE5 inhibition in the sex organs. And decreased testicular DHT equals less perennial blood trapping. Okay. These are details no one talks about. So, if you're on TRT and your brain is lit, but your junk is offline, that's not just blood flow, man. It's hormone chemistry. Now let's talk about dosing and HCG and really how to fix this. The solution to all these problems, the best one that we have available to us actually at this point, is HCG. I've been through dosing, honestly, 100 to 300 IU a day is where I'm at with the best dose. Now, look, some people are going to get away with 250 every other day. That's another good strategy for people that are on HRT, although I don't think that mimics as consistent as an intratesticular hormone environment that you would want, which is why daily injections work really well and make the most sense with HCG. I think this is best injected in the AM, and I think it is best injected subcutaneously. I have run experiments myself, and I've had clients do this as well, where they inject HCG intramuscularly and they get too much of a big sort of bolus of all that intratesticular stuff, especially estradiol, but it doesn't last all day. We've got some case studies on this where 100 IU, 150 IU of HCG at a time, within 24 hours is basically out of the system. So imagine if you're injecting it intramuscular and it's hitting the system fast, it definitely clears faster. All right, circling back to the bottom line here, TRT gives you systemic testosterone, but it shuts down the very thing that gives your penis life, which is local hormone production in the testes. So that's why without HCG, your libido might be fine or it might not be fine, but ultimately erections are usually weaker and your climax sensation is never going to hit peak level. So if you think about this whole system, it's like the solution when you're not on HCG, it's not just more testosterone, it's better biology, which would be induced by better paracrine signaling and intrasex organ hormone homeostasis. All right, as I said in the beginning, I'm a coach on TRT. This is essentially what I do, spend most of my time doing. If you need to hire me for sexual function specifically, whether it's a consult with me, we'll get you squared away, or otherwise, long-standing sexual dysfunction, erection issues, libido issues, you can't dial in no matter what, we might need some time. We got one-on-one packages for that. It's a 1 month, a 3 month, a 6 month, even a year for people that want to just work with me ongoingly. Having me in your corner to do all the thinking, do all the work, do all the protocol modulation, it's a beneficial thing if you've got the budget. So hire me in under a minute for any of that stuff. livecortex.com. Look, dialing in testosterone, okay, especially testosterone cypionate, can be difficult. So I created a course on it. The most difficult thing, the problem that people have dialing in on Cypionate is sexual function, right? This is just so common over the years. So, rather than you compiling 100 videos of mine that give all this information, and even then, so there's still information that's not in there, I made an entire video course about an hour and 5 minutes long, which explains how to dial in the sexual side on testosterone cypionate with every different imaginable combination of stuff, including AIs, no AIs, high dose, no AI, medium dose with an AI, DHT derivatives, DHT itself, ultimately a fail-safe protocol that if you can't dial in on cypionate, use this protocol and you will dial in on cypionate in terms of libido and erection. You can get that course in under a minute, livecortex.com. Instant download, you start watching it right away. All right, that has been the video now is, hold on. That's the Give me this. The video's over. Been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Do me 2 favors. Hit the like button. Makes a huge difference. And I didn't know how much of a difference it actually made. Huge difference, boys. Please hit the like button for your brother. Sub to the channel. Almost 33,000 subs and growing strong every day, rapidly. Love to have you on board. Otherwise, hope you're having a great week. Enjoy the rest of your week. Much more content coming soon. Live stream this Saturday. Kick ass. Rock on, boys. And I'll talk to you on the next one.